Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Raising the Bar. And today I'm happy to introduce this fellow. His name's Brendan Murphy. He's the author of The Grand Illusion, the Truthiverse podcast, and founder of Truthiversity. And he's a guy that I resonated with his channel. I spotted him a few weeks ago, and I was like, I have to get this guy on for a chin wag. We've connected time zones here, and I just thought for everyone watching, we're just gonna have a conversation. We're going to talk about the overlap between our channels and stuff like that. So Brendan, I noticed you on your channel. I think you talked about what your second book.
The main thrust of that is it's a very, very deep, very comprehensive, quite unique piece of research into the afterlife and anything connected to that realm. So yeah, I've been chipping away at this for years. It really needs to just be done and published.
Fair enough. So what's been happening? You've interviewed loads of people that have had the after death experiences, have you? Or what's been your line of inquiry with that?
On the podcast, I've generally just sort of gone with whoever I felt like, had something
Mm.
interesting to say at the time, in whatever the realm,
Mm.
doesn't necessarily have to be that stuff. As you saw, I spoke to Sari, I got him on to talk about neo-feminism.
Oh yeah,
Had
yeah,
Icon a couple of years ago to talk about his stuff, and just whatever interests me at the time. I prefer to
yeah,
do that than focus on the one thing constantly. I mean, because I'm so focused on the book every day or every other day that it's good
yeah.
to have a break and
Yeah,
get
fair
about
enough.
stuff.
But in terms of the book though, how has it been compiled? Have you actually just interviewed loads of people that have had the after death experience, or what's it been, or your own theories on it?
Yeah, it's kind of it's very research based. But I've had my own experiences with altered states of consciousness, and
Mm.
I've been reading about this type of stuff for the last 20 years. So because I'm a generalist and I'm a multidisciplinary kind of person, I pull massive amounts of disparate sort of information from different fields together,
Mm.
so that we can build a perspective view of things that isn't common.
Yeah, fair enough. And what would you say is the kind of conclusion with that, with the after death experiences? Because I just spoke to a guy, and he was dead for 30 minutes, and he talked about this afterlife of beautiful light. And it was high resolution. It wasn't dreamlike. It was like this, but just everything was light based, illuminary. And they were like, he said he could fly to different cities and stuff with his friends, and he met the people that he killed in this afterlife. And I found it quite fascinating. And I also spoke to another author who'd written a book. I've forgotten his name now, Eben something. And it does
Oh,
seem
Evan
to be,
Alexander, yeah.
yeah, it does seem to be there is a consistency amongst these people that are having these after death experiences. So can't be completely written off, can it?
No, there's massive consistency. It's actually quite astonishing when you see it, and you get pieces of evidence like Eben Alexander. He encountered a girl in the depths of his NDE where he didn't know who this person was.
Mm,
This spirit that he was encountering, and they were flying on the wing of a huge butterfly or something. It was one of these sort of
mm,
weird, surrealistic afterlife
mm,
kind of visionary experiences. But
mm,
he's being guided by this woman, and anyway, after the experience ends and his brain starts to recover and he comes back to conscious, normal life,
mm.
he's going through like an old family photo album and he sees the picture of this woman and he realizes this is actually, I say woman, let me just say a female of some
Yeah,
age. I don't want to specify because I'm
yeah,
going off my memory here. I
it's all
read it a
right.
long time ago. He sees a picture of this girl and he realizes it's the girl from the NDE, and it's actually his sister of his long lost sister, who I don't think he knew even existed, because it's one of those cases where the parents don't tell the kid. And there's
Yeah,
actually multiple examples of that where someone dies, they cross over, and they find a sibling that they did not know existed, and they come back and they start talking about this brother or sister, and their parents are like, "Oh my God, how do you know about this? Because we never told you." And there's multiple instances.
wow. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Absolutely. I didn't realize that happened to him. I'll have to go back and watch our chat again with Evan. Don't know if you mentioned. I'm sure he
Yeah.
must have mentioned that because it seems quite significant.
Yeah, it's fairly significant. Yes, and I don't know if he would have skipped over that, because I mean that
Yeah.
was one of the key things that actually showed that he had a legitimate experience that had some objective truth to it.
I'll tell you about a dream I had because it's quicker and easier to explain. So I was in a dream and I'm on a public train, like a overground train, and sat opposite me is a guy, and he's got a rucksack, and and this scene goes on for about a minute, I would say, and he slowly reaches out like comedy style, reaches out like the detonator, the handle to push down, and as he pushes it down, there's a big explosion, and in that moment, I wake up and I realize that big explosion that happened was my housemate coming in and shutting the door. So that made me think that what happens is that door slam was always there, but what it did is it rolled the dream narrative backwards through my mind, and I read it forwards, if you like. And so I
Hmm.
think that
Hmm.
that can often be the case. So I potentially what could be happening with Eben there is he's seen the photo with his, what was it, his sister, did he say?
Hmm. Yeah,
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 his
yeah, I
sister,
believe so.
yeah. And I mean, there could be other explanations of that whereby um, he might have, as a young kid, heard a conversation with his mum and dad talking about it as a baby or something like that, and it stayed in his memory, and then he's formed that narrative in a kind of a dreamlike sequence to make sense of that what he's been told. I know it's a little bit kind of mumble jumbled what I've said there, but I'm trying to say there's different ways that our minds can process information. I've got another ayahuasca one, but I don't know if that kind of made sense.
It does, and yeah, the last thing you're talking about is cryptomnesia, where that
Yeah,
memory gets hidden and buried, and then gets triggered later on, and people go, "Oh my
yeah,
God!" But
yeah.
yeah, it can sometimes be relevant, but it doesn't explain the multiple instances, which I've documented a whole bunch of them in this
Mm.
second book, where people access information that they simply have never ever had access to before.
Wow. All right, can you give us a little insight into that? Kind of any examples?
Well, I mean, talking about people discovering brothers and sisters who the
Yeah.
family had kept a secret, never mentioned, never talked
Yeah.
about, this kind of stuff, or just going somewhere and seeing something
Mm.
and going, oh, that's interesting, and like a remote city, and then the layout of the city somehow. Like you go and visit it and you're like, oh, I know if we go right here, turn right here, and they go right and they're like, the person with you is going, we've never been here. How do you know all this kind of thing? Like this kind of stuff
Mm.
is actually pretty widely documented. This information access that is
Mm.
physically impossible, but possible if you work with a broader paradigm of, consciousness not being restricted to the inside of your skull.
Yeah, okay. So in that instance, was that like a previous lifetime? Is that what the conclusion was with that?
Oh, well, one example of that is George Ritchie, who had his NDE when he was 20 years old. It's one of the most extensive that's been documented. And he was roaming around. He was in the army. He was roaming around the army barracks at the time, and he found himself outside of he'd been placed on a bed, because he physically died,
Mm.
and he realized, oh, the body under the sheet here, shit, that's me, that's my physical body. Oh shit, I'm dead. And then he's roaming around the halls of these barracks trying to get somebody's attention, but all the people he's walking past are ignoring him because they can't see him.
Yeah.
But then he ends up going and flying, sort of astral traveling to a remote city, this location he's never been to before, and then it's quite a detailed story. I talk about it in the book, but he
Mm.
ends up coming back to his body. And thanks to the quick thinking of a young lad who was on site, they managed to revive him with a quick injection of, I think, adrenaline,
Mm.
or something similar. And so he woke up and with a start, but he had this information of this layout of this city. And when he went there and visited with a friend, he was able to verify, this is where we go right here, we turn left here, we go, that's it. But he'd never actually visited the place before, and it really blew people's minds. He was able to describe where things were and anticipate where things were. Just as an example, I mean, that was a very nutshell version. His experience was much more extensive than that. He's
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
people do certain things. It was very involved, but one of the more solid, impressive ones on record.
Yeah, that actually, I just saw a clip from Ghost, the movie. Patrick, Patrick Swayze, and when he's actually in the hospital and he's watching some other guy die, and like the spirit goes up, and then another ghost comes and sit next to him, and he's walking around, and then he realizes that no one's actually getting his attention because he's dead, obviously. But so he actually had that experience in the hospital, and then how did he remote travel then? How did he just start flying?
Basically, yeah, he
Yeah,
flew. That
yeah,
was his experience.
right.
And that whole thing about people trying to get somebody's attention
Yeah,
while they're having an NDE, or an out-of-body experience and flailing around going, why are
Yeah.
you ignoring me?
Yeah.
Is very widely reported, and some very profound experiences have taken place in that kind of a way. And people, one guy managed to track down. One guy was in an accident, a car accident.
Mm.
I document this one in the book as well. So if I'm vague here, the details are in the book. But
Mhm.
there was a woman who came along to the roadside and helped to resuscitate and rescue him. And he remembered that he saw the side while he was in his out of body state. He
Mm.
saw the side of the van, and he remembered like the name of the company on the side of the van in
Mm.
his out of body state, and that he actually managed to retain that piece of information when he was revived and came back to his physical body. Anyway, the van drove off, everybody dispersed and went about their lives, but he managed to track down the company. And when he found the company, he found the woman who actually found him on the roadside and helped to revive him. And they had this very emotional reunion
Mm.
based on that piece of information that he got while he was physically dead.
Oh, and he saw the name of the company and then he contacted them.
Yeah, he found he
Yeah.
in his out of body state. He
Yeah.
saw this on the side of the truck,
Yeah.
and then later on, he went and contacted them and actually tracked down the woman, and
That's
they had
nice.
a very very powerful reunion of sorts. It was quite amazing.
That is actually that's crazy, man. Do you think there's a strong connection between the after death experience and the dream state?
Yeah, there is. They're related. They are related. It's not that one is the same as the other, but they are related because you're in a. I mean, when you're dreaming, you're essentially your locus of awareness shifts to, what you might call the astral body.
Mm.
Um, people like Robert Monroe are using their astral body to go venture here, venture there, travel to different places. When people have an NDE, that's basically the realm that they're operating in, is the so-called astral realm through that subtle body, which we're characterizing now as a plasma body because that's where, excuse me, that's where the science is kind of leading us when we connect these dots. So I don't know where I was going with that. I got sidetracked with
Yeah.
plasma.
Yeah, no, dream state. I was just wondering if there's a connection, yeah, with the dream
Yeah,
state. Because I
yeah.
mean I've had vivid dreams. I lucid dream a lot, but um, I'm always trying to contact dead people in my dreams. But after a while I realize it's still just a projection of my mind, my imagination, because I even did it last
Yeah.
night. I contacted an old friend in my dream, lucid dream, and I called him and he came and it kind of vaguely looked a little bit like him. And then we hung out for about 5 minutes. And then after the 5 minutes, it's just turned into a completely different person. And then I'm like, you're not really him. And then I called him again, and then a more of a likeness of him came along, and I realized that that's probably not him either. It's just my mental projection. But I'm wondering whether that is connected to the after death experience, or whether it's sort of there's layers to it, and you kind of go through
Yeah.
these layers to more of a kind of non-personal experience where it's all kind of connected, like coming out of your house and connecting to the neighborhood in a way, that kind of thing.
It really is like they're all connected. Let me give you an actual a case of like a dream, right? Because you're talking
Yeah.
about dreams. There are layers, and it's not just like a black and white thing. So you have to be a little bit nuanced with this stuff if you want to connect dreams to the
Mm,
afterlife, because they kind of are happening in a very similar kind of frequency band.
mm,
But I'll give you an example from I found this. This is a case from Anthony Peake, who's a good writer in these
mm,
subjects. So he tells the story of a woman called Samantha Treasure, who was a London-based Canadian parapsychology researcher, and she was 15 when she had a vivid dream in which her sister let a white cat in from the backyard, and it then entered her bedroom and engaged in conversation with her. Then, following this dream, she's at school and she's leaving a German class, and she encounters her best friend, and she starts telling him about how she can't stop thinking about the dream she had last night. But he interrupts her as she's telling it, and he goes, "About a white cat." And that was completely unprompted, but he then detailed all of the major aspects of the dream back to her, and she was absolutely gobsmacked. Her jaw was just on the ground. And so she's like, "How do you know about this dream that I had? How do you know in such detail of
mm.
what it was all about and the contents of it?"
Yeah.
And he smiled and goes, "Because I was the cat."
Oh my God, no way. That's crazy. And he felt confident about that as well. And there was like yeah.
you can visit people. It's documented. We have some pretty
Yeah.
interesting cases. Robert Monroe appeared to a friend of his, and they described him as looking like I think it was a filmy piece of chiffon in his out of body state. Yeah, I mean, Don DeGracia is another astral explorer, and he
Mm.
told a story of trying to contact a friend of his, and his friend was, I think he found him sort of out wandering in the astral plane, but the problem is his mate was asleep. So when people are asleep, dreaming, and essentially asleep in the astral plane, they're not really consciously processing anything. They're not really very lucid.
Mm.
So trying to communicate with them can be challenging. But he was trying to tell his friend, "This is really important. Remember this conversation and ring me when you wake up tomorrow morning."
Yeah.
Um, and so anyway, the long story short was his mate, I believe, did get in contact with him because he had a vague feeling that he should make a phone call to him the next morning.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? What can go on? I mean, I've fallen in love with girls in my dreams, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like heartbreaking because I know I'm going to wake up and I'm never going to see you again. So I've like asked for their Instagrams, and then I've like woken up and then like tried to type it in, and it's like it's not true, it's not real. I'm like, fuck. you I'll get like a little bit of information. I'll quickly wake myself up. I'll usually ask for their social media handle. Then I'll wake myself up and I realize, oh, okay, it was just like all made up. The way that I check to see if it's a real experience or not is I'll ask them a question like, what's your name? And then the way to do it is like wait 10 seconds and ask their name again. And you'll usually find they'll give you a different answer, or um, something else I do is I'll get them to talk, and as they're talking, I'll count to 10. So as I'm counting one, two, and you're talking three, four, as you're talking in the dream, like you'll start saying one, two, three with me, because it's like I can't process those two things at the same time, and I'm going, you're a projection of my mind, buddy. Fuck off. you know. And so I always
Yeah.
test that on
Yeah.
I test it on dream characters, and everyone's failed so far. So I know that it's just my own projection of my own mind. But I would love to have that kind of non-personal experience. But would you say then, let's say you're in Australia and you're awake and I'm asleep, and let's say I visited you in a dream. Would you have to be asleep for me to see you in a dream, do you think?
Um, sorry, say it again.
Yeah,
Who's
I'm
awake
just
and who's
thinking
asleep?
like to meet someone in a dream, would they also have to be asleep and dreaming then, I'm guessing? Because if you're the other side of the world and you're awake and I'm sleeping, is it still possible or not?
The simple answer to that is I mean, to meet them in a dream, they need to be dreaming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, you're going to be trying to get the attention of someone whose awareness is fixed in their physical body,
Yeah.
consciousness, and that's going to be a lot harder because they're not tuned into the frequency you're operating on.
Yeah.
And I just found a little example of what can happen. Like I mentioned Don DeGracia, and he did a projection to somebody who was a roommate of his at the time, and he
Yeah.
managed to half wake him up. The guy sort of blearily, opened his eyes and
Yeah.
said, "Oh, you look like a haze." You look like a haze. But yeah, you gotta to
Mm.
have it would be really interesting. I mean, we've got both sides of the coin. We've got people who've seen in a waking state, they've seen their friend doing a projection or a visiting
Mm.
spirit entity or whatever. But we've also got the cases of people meeting up in this sort of astral dreamscape
Yeah.
and having a sort of verifiable experience. Although it's funny, I think the dream meetings are a little bit less commonly documented.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a lucid dreaming guy on, and forgotten his name. I'm going to put it in, flash it up. But I said, look, I'm going to meet you in a dream. Like he's like one of the biggest lucid dream authors. And I came back and he set me a couple of little challenges to ask him, and I came back and I gave it to him, and he didn't remember it. He said, he doesn't recall it, but I told him all this stuff that the dream character of him said to me. And it was just complete. It just felt like complete waffle. But I don't know. Maybe you can take something from it or not. One of the things he said was the lion lies down in crisis. That's what I heard from his dream character said to me. So I gave it to him, and he kind of reverse engineered that to kind of fit things that might have happened in his life. But who knows, man? Who knows?
Uh,
I mean, I'm going to keep trying it though.
yes.
I'm going to keep trying it because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there's got to be something in it. There has to be some kind of thing in it. I mean, another lucid dream I had was no, before the lucid dream, I said to my friend, is there anything that you've said to me in the past, like a bit of information, like what school you went to, or anything like that, that I can't remember now? I'm going to go into my dream and I'm going to ask for that information. I'm going to come back with it. And he goes, all right, yeah, like, ask me what primary school I went to, because I definitely did ask you that. I went, yeah, okay, because I can't remember it. So that night I went into a lucid dream and I was calling for him and couldn't get hold of him. So I called him on the dream phone and he answered. And he said, Osage. I went to Osage School, right? And I kind of woke up and I said, look, hey, mate, I've got the answer. Is it Osage School? He goes, no, no, it's not Osage. I'm like, damn. Anyway, I'm going that evening. I'm driving to my squash club. Okay. It's a 10-minute drive. I've always gone the same way every single day, like thousands of times, right? For some reason, at this mini roundabout, I just do a right just for no reason. I'm just like, this is bizarre. Why have I gone down here? It's like, the same trip you'd always do over and over again. I just go down this path. And I was like, right, I'm going to do a U-turn in the road, like a three-point turn. I'm going to spin back round. As I'm spinning in the side of the road, I look up and it says Osage School just there, right? And I'd never seen that word Osage before. And I'm just looking at it, it's right there,
Mhm.
Osage. And I'm like, bloody. So I'm wondering whether, yeah, I mean, there's some kind of crazy sort of, I don't know if it's time dilation, but where things can bleed in from the future and the past. You know what I mean? And it can come through that way.
Yeah,
But yeah,
totally,
so that wasn't it
totally.
wasn't it wasn't like a hit. I wouldn't say that was a hit, but there was something in that. There's something in that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the way that I've been looking at it for quite a long time, and I'm not alone in this, is when you shift up a dimensional level, say, or up a density level, that higher level encompasses the all of the time and all of the space of the lower level.
Mm,
So if you're going like in your dream state, you're shifting up a dimensional level into, let's call it the astral
yeah.
plane, and then everything in the physical world suddenly becomes like a point, and you can see it's like you can see the entire timeline kind of thing.
Mm,
And so then you can come back to the physical and you've got maybe information that you shouldn't have, but it's because you are at that higher dimensional level where you had access to the entire, timeline or time space
mm,
matrix of the lower dimensional level. So every time you go up, you encompass the level below. And that's what I think that's what is happening in a sense. We are getting this kind of, and then it looks like we get this backwards through time effect where
yeah.
you go and or like your brain tries to make sense of things that are not linear, and it's not linear because of this dimensional kind of interface.
Yeah, it's almost that layer there is there's no such thing as time, I think. It's just like a quantum soup,
Mm,
where the time, the past, the present, the future is all kind of jumbled up, and you can kind of draw from it, and you can create you can create some kind of linear timeline from it. But in that actual realm, it's all kind of anything goes. You know what I mean? Like a pool of potential. I don't know what you'd call it. I mean, I also had that experience on ayahuasca, but yeah, it's still fascinating what can be drawn from it, I think. Yeah,
It's very interesting to think about.
any sort of similar experiences for you, kind of trippy sort of stuff like that?
Trippy. I haven't had a lot of. My dreams have been disappointingly boring, I have to say. I've had like experiences of infinite consciousness in meditation and this kind of thing. So like very, very vastly expanded. Kind of like bypassing all the intermediate levels. For some reason, that seems to be a tendency with me. I've had it. I've actually, you mentioned the Osage thing and something
Yeah,
else before that earlier.
yeah.
Um, I remember one time I was back when I was living with my parents' original house, the one I grew up in. My bedroom was down the end of the house, and they had down the other end was the kitchen, and a radio was playing.
Mm,
I woke up one morning. Just before I woke up, I was having a dream about being at a beach and having like this huge wall of sand, like crumbling down behind me, like chasing me.
mm,
And I'm trying to get away so I don't get buried under this huge wall of sand. And I get up and I get out of bed. I walk down the hall, and as I get into the kitchen, there's a news story talking about these somebody who'd been at a beach and dug a massive hole, and this huge wall of sand had caved in on them. And that was,
mm.
I mean, I don't. It was like the dream must have happened seconds before the material came through on the radio, but in that astral dream space, it's not a separate thing. It's not a linear
Right.
thing. It's like we can look down at the whole timeline and go,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, so this is the radio broadcast over here in the future. but we're going to work that into the dream that you're going to have a few seconds,
before.
beforehand, kind of thing.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying
Right.
about the when my housemate came in and slammed the door and it created that explosion. How is it that my mind knew to create a whole time sequence with this guy, like the terrorist doing the detonator? How did it know that my housemate was going to walk in just at that moment, just when the bang went? Like, how is that so? The only conclusion I can form from that is the dream memory was created in the moment of that bang, and my mind interpreted it forward, like it kind of rolled the dream backwards, and I kind of processed it forwards. Maybe that happened with you there.
There's another way of putting it is you could say that the door had already slammed from
Yeah.
the perspective of you in a dream. The door's already slammed because you're not operating in the linear time space anymore.
Explain that one. Okay, let me get
But your
like
brain,
yeah.
so like it's like your astral consciousness gets to see all of that happen, and it's like it can just look at it all simultaneously,
Yes.
going, okay, I'm sleeping here,
Yeah.
the door slams here, but it's all the same moment.
Yeah.
It's all the same moment that you're looking at because you're in a higher dimensional space. But then when you come back into the 3D space in your body, your brain has to basically convert it into a linear sequence of events to try to make
Exactly.
sense of it, even though it's not
Exactly
really
that.
linear.
That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I think is probably the case. Yeah. When I have it when I'm falling asleep and I'm getting right sleepy, I notice the thoughts in my head come as memories, and then usually I just like fall asleep. But then if I just keep myself awake and put my awareness onto that memory, I go, oh no, I've just created that in that moment. That never actually happened. It's like that. I'm just sort of
Mm.
really trying to put my awareness onto it. So it's almost like, or like deja vu would be an example, where you have a kind of, it feels like a memory. It feels like you've been here before. But when I really put my awareness onto it, I realize it's just, this is this is something that I've just created in that moment. It isn't actually a legitimate memory. It's all occurring in that moment.
It's super, super difficult to make sense of unless you're working with like a hyperdimensional kind of
Hmm.
a model. Otherwise, your brain goes in circles trying to make it linear, make it
Yeah.
work in a linear way, but it doesn't. Like deja vu doesn't
Yeah.
really work in a linear way. When people have those experiences where,
Hmm.
and there's actually something called future memory, which I think PMH Atwater coined the term future memory, where people they have an experience that is a literal immersion experience of what we would think of as the future, but it hasn't happened yet. But they're having this experience, and then a couple of weeks later, that exact scenario that they've already lived through in their
Yeah.
mind happens to the T and in precise
Mm.
detail, in a way that they've got no control over. But this is the thing about being able to shift dimensional perspectives. It's the only way it works is from a hyperdimensional perspective, where
Mm.
at that level everything down in physical 3D world is just a single point happening. It's all there available to our awareness,
Mm.
without the linearity and the separation. We can see it all happen, but then we come back to 3D brain-based awareness, and we have to kind of make sense of it in a way that it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, well, this happened, this happened, this happened. It's like it doesn't really work, but
It doesn't work.
the
Yeah.
really high quality experiences are the ones that show us that there's something much more interesting happening than just the mind kind
Absolutely.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
entertaining itself.
Yeah. I'm going to give you my ayahuasca story because this totally fits into what we're talking about here. So
Nice. Let's hear it.
it was my first, I know some people have a funny relationship with it, but I think, everything's worth trying once, well, most things. Um, so it was my initiation. I had double the dose. So it was obviously quite, I was, it kind of knocked the bollocks out of me. And I remember, I would say for people that don't know about ayahuasca, it's just, let's just say it's like DMT. You go on journeys. People might call them hallucinations, but the shaman's term is a journey. And what happened was that as I was deep into that journey, I kind of opened my eyes and everyone was in the room, but trippy stuff was happening in the timeline. So, for instance, I would think to myself, oh God, I wish someone would just blow that candle out. It's really annoying me. As I'm thinking it, someone just immediately blows it out, literally 1 second later. And then I'm going, oh, now I can't see where my water is. Like, how am I going to find my water? And in that moment, someone has the Mapacha cigar, and I can see the red ember of the cigar. And in that exact moment, he walks across the room and he stops. If you can see, he kind of stops there, and I just go. okay, let's put my hand down. My hand lands absolutely flush on the bottle. Like it doesn't even slip off the top of it. It just lands straight on it, like bang, like that. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And then everything was happening like that. I was even thinking in my head, um, God, I've almost reached the God self where I can just think of anything and it will come to me. And just as I'm thinking that, I puke on myself. And it's almost like a lesson to say, don't get ahead of yourself. You're not God. And then in that moment, no one can really hear that either. It's kind of silently puked on myself. I hear these mutterings in the room going, ha, 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 like that.
Mm.
So I'm taking that as they're kind of saying to me, don't get ahead of yourself. You're not God. It's like, pull it back in. But in the narrative that I was forming was that it's like Bruce Almighty. I can kind of think anything and it will manifest it. You see what I mean? And this happened again where I was like, well, if I can manifest anything, can I have like a hot chick just to emerge here? And in that moment, like everyone in the room went like that, as if to say, fuck off, John, you know. But they were just like in their realities, in their narratives, they were just clearing their throat or having their own
Mm.
independent. But it was almost like I was pulling everything in the room and authoring my own timeline based on what I believe to be happening. But they were having their own separate experience, if that kind of makes sense. So yeah, and it kind of it went on like that. There's many other things where, I really needed something or I wanted something. And in that moment, they would come over to me. Or I said, I really wish someone would come over to me. And someone in that exact moment went, John, are you okay? Like, so for me, my conclusion with that is, yeah, I don't really have one, but it's the mind trying to form a linear sequence. It's almost like all that chaos happened and it reverse engineered a narrative through it because everyone else is having a completely separate experience. They weren't thinking, oh, John needs water. I'm going to walk over here with the cigar. Like that was completely separate, but it was like, yeah, it can't even really explain it because it's so, yeah, jumbled up.
I'll tell you, no, man, I like it. It reminds me of in the first book I wrote about this. So I had one of my in the early days of my awakening process. I had a bunch of synchronicity happening. My tongue's not working. Synchronicities happen, but one of the most epic ones I included in the book. I was sitting on the couch. This is back in my parents' house. I was sitting on the couch. I had in the background there was a radio playing. I'm reading this book called The Holographic Universe, which you probably know of, and that was the book that blew me open and started me down this whole path. So I'm reading this book called The Holographic Universe. It's about the holographic nature of reality. The whole point of it is everything's interconnected. The internal world is reflected in the external world. This is the holographic kind of principle, yada yada. And I'm reading this book about synchronicity. I'm reading the chapter on synchronicity, and inside the chapter on synchronicity, about inside this book, The Holographic Universe, it starts talking about the activist pioneer Rosa Parks from the US, and she was the woman who was largely held responsible for the amazing the Montgomery bus boycott, and pushing forwards to African Americans being able to sit on a bus,
Yeah.
heaven forbid. And so she was key. She was instrumental in this very important movement. But as I'm reading this passage about Rosa Parks in the context of synchronicity inside a book about the holographic nature of reality, the radio in the background in the kitchen starts talking suddenly about the host of the show starts suddenly talking about Rosa Parks. And I'm sitting there going, whoa, like what are the odds that I would be sitting here listening to the radio at all with,
Mm,
I'm normally not here, let alone what are the odds they talk about Rosa Parks just off the cuff,
mm,
let alone while I'm reading about Rosa Parks, let alone in a passage, the context of which is synchronicity in a
mm.
book about the holographic nature of reality. I mean, this is astronomical.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's crazy. Absolutely crazy. I mean, I have a coincidence diary. So I have a dream diary and I have a coincidence diary. And I might just dig it up here. So I mean, you tell me what are the odds of this? Okay, so exactly like that. I'll be writing a word on a bit of paper, let's say. Let's say it's just making notes. And as I'm writing, I'll come to the word holographic. And just as I'm writing the word holographic, the TV will say the word holographic, right? What are the odds of that happening when you really break it down? Like how many words are there in the dictionary, tens of thousands, right? Like, what are the odds on me writing the word holographic and the word holographic coming out of the radio or on the TV or something like that, right? I'm like, I have to write that word down. So basically, every time, and I get this at least once a week. I'll have that happen where I'm talking with you, and then a bus will go past, and on the advert, it will have that word that I've just said in that exact moment as the bus is going past, as a synchronicity, you know. So I've got like a coincidence diary that I've got, and I write down all of them that happen. Um, so yeah, like I'll read some out here. Like you can, I'll show you. There's loads. So these are all the ones that happen like that. So what are the odds of that happening that many times? So I've had like fun, mine, cook, assists, heart, play, breakup, buy, change, Iceland, time, guest, two, police, boxer, little, effect, top. Like, so what I do is I kind of try and I mean, there's dozens. I mean, the odds on that is just insane. So what I do is I kind of use that as a little bit of a guide for me, you know. I kind of
Yeah. Do you notice like is it happening? Do you get a certain kind of a message or a confirmation of something, or is it just an amazing coincidence?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's how you want to see it. If you see everything as coincidence, then yeah, you can kind of ignore it. But if you see everything as interconnected, then maybe that is a little bit of a. It could be a nudge, giving me a nudge in a certain direction, or I take some things to mean, yeah, you're on the right track, kind of thing. That's the right way of thinking. Like I'll have a thought in my head. Sometimes I'm thinking something and I'll hear it, and I've got a slightly different diary for that as well. So I kind of break them up as well. And sometimes that for me is telling me that's the right idea. Yeah, you want to continue with that. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
so I've got this my little coincidence diary that I do. But I mean, what are the chances of all those work as you're writing it or just seeing it, you hear it? It's just, and there's dozens of them I get, at least one a week.
I have some that are so insanely astronomically improbable that I can't even talk about them because you need to actually write it out so that you get the details of it and the layers. Like
Yeah,
I'll probably include a couple in book three because
yeah.
it goes into the collective unconscious and the way we're all interconnected. It's fascinating. I've got a friend in the UK, Nick Sambrook, who has the most insane industrial scale, not even synchronicity. We need another word for it. It's so
Mm,
bizarre what happens with him and his whole family getting pulled into other people's narratives. Like they keep being put into people's films and plays and books and
mm,
details, minute details of his life showing up in the writings of Philip K. Dick and all this sort of stuff. Bizarre, really bizarre, over and over and over. And I live with my partner, Amy, and I are so embedded in each other's fields that it's gotten monotonous almost. Like I'll think something and then 2 or 3 seconds later she'll say it. And this is the pattern. The pattern is I think it and then a few
yeah,
moments later she says it. And it happens on a daily basis. Like it's so quotidian now. I don't even we barely even
yeah,
bother talking about it.
yeah. And I think this is kind of connected to the Mandela effect, I think. The kind of bleeding of the bleeding between of time between the future, the present, and the past. For instance, it's as if the past can be changed in the present moment, and then in that exact moment, it's always been like that. And then it might change again, but then it's like in that present moment, oh no, but it's always been like that. There's a scene in Red Dwarf, I don't know if you know, it's like a comedy, like sci-fi from Britain. It's one of my
Uh,
favorite TV shows from the 80s and 90s. But there's one episode in
okay,
there.
I've never watched it.
Oh, mate, if you haven't seen Red Dwarf, that is absolutely classic. But there's one episode, and I think
Okay.
it's to do with reality bumps. So anyway, they're kind of on this spaceship, and then they hit these bumps in the spacecraft, and they go to take Lister for a scan. He's one of the main characters, and they do an X-ray, and they see that he's actually a cyborg. And the cyborg on the spacecraft is Crichton. He's like the servant, and he's going, "The hell, man! You're making me be the servant, and you're one of us. You're one of me all along."
I'm afraid, sir, you are not human. You're a droid, technically subordinate to me.
What does this all mean?
So he swaps roles, and he gets
Hmm.
Lister to be like the servant, right? And then they hit another reality bump.
So we just crashed through an unreality pocket?
Which created a false reality, making us believe Mr. Lister was... Oh my. Sir, may I see your arm?
Mac. He looks normal, human.
He is human, but it kind of went back to it kind of reset again. But in that reality bump, the past changed to form the new present. And I think it's kind of similar to that. That's what's kind of happening with the Mandela effect, I think, where it's possible that we have these reality bumps whereby the past changed, but then in the present we kind of process that as it's actually always been like that until we hit the next reality bump and it changes again. And then it's like, okay, well, the past changed, but then it's always been like that. I don't know if you have any insights into the Mandela effect. If you looked into that, if you can connect it to what we've been talking about, it's that kind of hyperdimensionality where in that kind of quantum field, it's kind of, it can all change, the past, the present, and the future.
Totally. And quantum mechanics is saying that's exactly what it's saying. They've done experiments where measurements that took place, in the state of a past measurement was affected by the future measurement, or the future measurement was affected by a previous measurement. And there's this retro causality back and forth between time. And this is our linear minds trying to make sense of what is just the quantum field with its eternal nowness. And then you have, if you take that and apply it to like the whole Mandela effect and the multiverse thing, the multiverse idea, I think has some merit to it. Philip K. Dick experienced memories of a life that he'd never lived before. And it wasn't a past life thing. It was like, he was adamant that he had memories from a parallel timeline that never eventuated here, but which he had somehow experienced. And it's sort of like we get these branching, the branching off of the timeline. We have the main timeline here, and then we get an offshoot of it. And then something happens and there's a glitch, or whoever's overseeing this process doesn't like where it's going, and so they cancel that timeline and we revert back here. But now we've got memories from the parallel timeline,
yes, exactly.
But we don't have any evidence of it.
That's exactly how I feel. Maybe that's what CERN is doing. I don't know, where it can kind of rip holes in the time continuum and actually push us onto a different timeline that they want, or something like that. But yeah, there was something I was going to say about that. So that's what I think intuition is. Okay, so intuition, when you feel like something's definitely going to happen, you don't know why. It's kind of irrational why you think it's going to happen, and you just know, and then it happens, right? I think it's because on a quantum level, you've actually already experienced that timeline. You've already been there in the future, right? You've had that experience. You've had all the experiences, but you kind of perceive it in this brain, in the physical brain now, as in this is past, present, and future. You've had that experience, and it's like a memory of that, even though it's in the future. If you see what I mean. That's what I think intuition is. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, the Global Consciousness Project with Dean Radin and a bunch of other scientists, and they've got these random number generators all around the world.
Yeah.
And they found that when there's a global, like an event of global proportions, like that everybody is focused on, billions of people around the world, the random number generators stop producing random numbers. They create order and coherence around the world. So here's the kicker, right? This is before the event takes place. There's a window where there is order and coherence generated by these electronic devices, and that is completely nonlinear quantum behavior. And that is an illustration of what we're talking about. Like say, if we use this terminology of like the astral level, the astral dimensionality, that event has already happened from the perspective relative to us in 3D. So that information's already there in the field, and then it starts to trickle into this window preceding the actual 3D event, right?
So what exactly happened there? So you're saying it was just randomly allocated numbers?
So they have these devices called random number generators, and they just spew out, like, it's basically just random quantum kind of noise, just number generation in randomness, total randomness. You can't predict what it's going to do. So it's completely what's the word? I forget the word, but anyway, that's what they do, and they have them all around the world.
Yeah.
And when an event, like say the death of Princess Diana, right? Like something that gets everybody's attention, and brought media outlets around the world are talking about it. Before the actual thing happens, like before she dies and before the media broadcasts start to kick off, there is a window of, say, a number of hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, or whatever it happens to be, before it happens, where the random number generators stop behaving randomly. And we're talking about multiple different
Yeah,
devices
what?
around the
So
world.
you get like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like it goes into a sequence, you mean?
Yeah, like I'm not sure exactly what the output is, but
Yeah.
basically they stop behaving randomly and they synchronize in a sense.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, so it starts to take on some kind of connected pattern to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no longer
And
arbitrary. Yeah,
there's a
it kind of takes on some kind
yeah,
of coherent fixed pattern. Yeah. Just before the
yeah,
event happens.
for a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, just before and maybe just after, while everyone's attention is about to become focused on it, and then while it
Wow.
still is focused on it, you get this window of order rather than total randomness. Well, if we look up, you could look up random number generators and
Okay.
the GCP.
Today, there are over 60 random event generators placed around the world. The numbers that come into the generators during normal random events for global consciousness are just that, random. Several hours in advance of a major world event, non-random, coherent numbers are present. A large spike in the data waveform appears, giving a precognition that a major event is about to occur.
The idea is these devices are being affected by the minds of people all around the world unconsciously.
Okay.
So if you get enough minds focused on the one thing, it creates a field effect around the world, which produces a certain amount of order in the data that's being produced by the machines.
But how do you input that? Like, how would it record that? Like, how would it take our, you know, let's say, how would it record us? Like,
You would have to ask those guys about that.
okay, fair enough. Don't worry. Yeah, no, it's all good. I'll look into it.
There are 2 satellites over the northern hemisphere. Every 30 minutes they send back a signal telling scientists how strong this magnetic field of the Earth is. It's important because all life is connected to it. There is no them and us when it comes to the magnetic field of every CEO of every corporation, every leader of every nation, every blade of grass, every hamster, every goldfish, every human is linked to this field. So what happens, the field is important. And what scientists found is 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 15 minutes after the first plane hit the first tower, there was a very unusual spike in the strength of the magnetic fields of the Earth attributed to the collective outpouring of human emotion, heart-based emotion, the strongest magnetic generator in the body.
This also might connect to predictive programming as well. And like the way that we see it linearly is that we see it as something occurs in a movie or TV show, and then the event happens, and then we look back and we think, okay, that must have been put into the collective consciousness, and then we've somehow cobbled that together and made that happen. That's kind of like the predictive programming way of thinking about it. But what if that event happened, and then the collective memory of that movie was created in that moment? So we actually created the movie. Let's say an event happens in the year 2024, okay, and it's exactly like the movie from 1993, right? Whatever. What if in 2024 the event happens and we think, oh, that was from the movie? But what if we actually all collectively remembered that we created that movie in that moment in 2024 collectively? I know that's a little bit, but that's kind of what I'm getting at with my experiences in the psychedelic experience and the dreams and stuff like that, where you create the past in that moment, in the present moment. And maybe that's really what predictive programming is. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. And a lot of people in the conspiracy community are very quick to attribute everything to a kind of a malicious intent and a conscious intention, whereas I think a lot of at least some of what happens is exactly what you're describing. It's that retrocausality back and forth through time that can't be explained in a Newtonian way, and most conspiracy buffs don't think about things like that.
Yeah. Well, they're not really interested in that kind of level, that layer, are they? They're more interested in the authorities trying to get them.
Yeah, which we're all dreaming all that crap into existence as well. Like it's literally it's like a hallucinatory, psychedelic vision that we're all having right now. It was just a dream that we're manufacturing.
Yeah.
So, running
Yeah.
around pointing fingers at the authorities and being angry with them is kind of, pretty amusing from that level.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, totally. Yeah. This is why Paul Levy, Watika, he wrote a book about how we're kind of in a collective dream. We're all collectively dreaming this experience into being. And this has always been known, going back,
Mm-hmm.
thousands of years, but we seem to think that we seem to have some kind of solipsistic idea in reality where whereas we're actually all dreaming this into being. We are the creators and what's being created all at the same time collectively. It's kind of like a weird concept for people, but if you can understand a lucid dream where you know that as you're walking through your dreamscape, you know that you are the creator of everything, but you're also being created in that moment. If you can take that as a metaphor for life and extend it into your life, it kind of makes a little bit more sense that it's just another kind
It's
of
a perfect analogy because
yeah.
Oh, exactly. It's perfect. The analogy is perfect, and that's one I've used before because it applies so well. Like if you have a dream, any kind of dream, you are manufacturing all the scenery, you're manufacturing all the characters, and then you're inserting yourself in it to play a role. So it's like this role-playing video game that you dive into to have this immersion experience, and everybody you interact with is a figment of your imagination. Literally, you've created them. The difference I think with reality more broadly is that it's a little bit more of a collaborative thing, although it's valid to look at it both ways. I could sit here and say I'm manufacturing, I'm dreaming you into existence and you're dreaming me into existence, and at root it's all fundamentally true because there's only one of us here. There's only ultimately one field of consciousness creating the whole thing anyway. And individuals can do this stuff as well. I mean, parapsychology has thousands of experiments where people have demonstrated the ability to manipulate or influence all sorts of different objects or systems or what have you. It's not new at all or controversial even. It's just it's something we can all do to various extents.
I mean, like an example of that is a friend of mine, Vineet Bhatia. He said to a group of us, he said, I want you to all think of a yellow umbrella, and I want you to send me a photo when you see this yellow umbrella in your life, and so about a week later, another guy in the group, he sent a picture and he goes, look, here's the yellow umbrella. And it took me about 6 months before I spotted the yellow umbrella and I took a photo of it. But in that moment, I had actually created that umbrella because until I've actually taken a photo of it, that didn't exist in my reality. So when I saw that had actually been created those 6 months previous. So that's an example of that kind of intention and reflection happening not in real time, but in protracted time. So I've set the intention. It took a little bit while, and then it manifested. So we can create our realities to a certain extent just through the power of intention. Kind of connected, right?
Completely. That's right. Yeah, it's like if you're doing it in a dream, you would just get a faster response time. Like the umbrella would be there.
Exactly. Yeah. I wonder why it takes sort of longer to manifest things in this plane, of awareness.
Yeah, I think that it's just part and parcel of the type of game that we're playing. The type of experience that is being sought by the soul, the oversoul or high self or whatever you want to call it. It's looking for a type of evolutionary experience that is not possible in other states of being or different realms. And so this, the I don't know, what do you call it, the slowness or the challenging sort of nature of physical existence brings kind of a certain opportunity with it. The difficulties that are inherent in it make it an interesting challenge and leaves the soul in a different state than when it entered the video game, so to speak. So I don't have necessarily a set point on the details of why it is so much slower to manifest, but it is partly to do with the nature of this level of the dream.
Yeah, and we sort of maybe came into this level of the dream to have some kind of lesson to take back. But then again, on that, during the ayahuasca experience, I was thinking it, putting the intention out, and it was happening with like seconds later. So it was, yeah. it can happen under certain states of you know, like of you know, certain psychedelics and whatnot. But generally speaking, though, it's sort of a muddied intention and reflection field. You know, you might put out a weak, wishy-washy intention, and you might get something back, you know, years later or something like that. But yeah, just seems to be how it is.
Yep.
Mm, mm.
It's funny, you know, it can happen like you said, like you found in the ayahuasca thing, it can happen really fast. I was just saying a few days ago, I was walking down a cobblestone road here in town, and about 15 minutes earlier than I found a coin, and about 15 minutes prior to that, I had the mental, I don't know, I guess the intent and the visualization of, oh, you know, wouldn't it be great to find some money on the ground while we're walking along, kind of thing. And then, you know, sure enough, 15 minutes later, that's exactly what happened. And it can be really quick. I think that, you know, you often hear people talk about how to manifest and this kind of thing. And in that instance, I had a thought very briefly, and there was a certain amount of intention attached to it, but I let it go and forgot about it very, very quickly. I didn't dwell on it or try to intend anything or will anything. It just was there and it was gone. And then sure enough, you know, moments later it was actually happening. So, you know, we don't necessarily need to overcomplicate things. I think we're really good at getting in our own way. You know, sometimes we just need to make a choice and state a preference.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, I've been talking to a lot of guests who have witnessed satanic rituals and stuff like that, right? Where they sacrifice children and to this like demonic realm. It's very consistent amongst all the stories, all the testimonies, right? And then there's that kind of Faustian exchange where the demonic realm give them certain gifts and abilities and luck, you know. So actually, I'm interviewing a guy in about 40 minutes. He was a satanic high wizard, you know, whatever they call it, right? And he's going to tell the story about how, as a kid, he was doing these, he was summoning this demon, and then he would ask for money, and then he would, on his way to school, he would find like wrapped up like loads of notes in an elastic band just there, you know, by the school, and he was kept doing that and doing it. So that's right. This is so powerful, you know. But I'm actually thinking that what's happening there is that that demonic entity or that kind of in that demonic realm, it can play within the quantum field. So it can basically go through all the kind of almost infinite timelines and pick the one where there was actually happened to be someone that left the money there, and it can move, it shifts, it kind of in a, you know, quantum leap like the or maybe there's a movie that's maybe does this better, but it can move you into that particular timeline that had that money there. That's how it does it, I think. So I think that, you know, so that is that in that kind of, if you want to call them ascended masters or these demon realms, they are masters of the quantum world, and they can push you, they can move the train onto the different tracks, the different timelines, that particular one that had that money there, but we kind of perceive it as luck. We could perceive that as magic, miracle.
Yeah. And it may also be like an apport, you know, a manifestation of something directly from the field itself, the quantum field.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I never thought of that. What you mean, just like kind of just in that moment, it could just manifest it and be waiting there for him.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, you know, there's some really good research around the manifestation of spirits into full body tangible form. I mean, if you know, entities can do that, then why not create other objects? I mean, you know, like in India, there's a history of, you know, yogis being able to produce objects out of thin air, and some of it, obviously, you know, for those of you who are cynics out there, I'm very aware that some of it is just trickery and whatever. But there is also a genuine phenomenon where things can manifest from what we think of as, you know, thin air or nothingness, but it's actually the information in the field being what's the word, like kind of congealed into something we can detect and perceive as solid matter, because ultimately that's all it really is. It's just information, just standing waves, little nano vortices of standing waves being organized into geometric form that we interpret as something solid and tangible. But there is nothing solid or tangible really. At the end of the day, it's all just swirling energy.
Is that maybe why you have like these, you know, like the street hypnotists that can make someone believe they're eating an apple and it's really an onion? Well, maybe in their own reality, it actually was an apple, you know? but to everyone watching, it's an onion. But kind of in their own holographic reality, they've been hypnotized to reconfigure the structure of that apple into an onion, right? Or the other way around. But yeah, from the onion into an apple. So they're actually thinking it's an apple, and they are actually eating an apple in their reality. But to everyone else watching, we're looking at it from it's like rejigging the pixels on the screen to form something else. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So yeah, it's like that person eating the onion, they're having the experience of eating an apple. And how can you on the outside, who are we to say that they're not having the experience of eating an apple? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like
That's what I'm saying.
you
Yeah.
can have these overlapping reality
Yeah.
tunnels, and
Yeah.
one reality tunnel is very different to the next one. It's like, well,
Yeah.
what's objectively real then?
Yeah, exactly. Because David Icke always gives the example about how they hypnotized a guy. I think he held something behind his back, and then they hypnotized the guy to not be able to see that person in front of him, and then he was able to say what was written on the pen that was behind his back, because in that moment he was saying that you can actually reconfigure the reality, that construct that you're seeing in front of you, to remove that person, to only then see that the pen that was behind him, that kind of thing, isn't it?
This is what we're doing all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that, in situations like that, it becomes really, really obvious that something amazing is happening. But we're all doing it all the time. Like people are hypnotized into a belief system, and then the only information they perceive in their reality is information that supports the belief system. They literally edit out and
Yeah.
delete
Yeah.
information so that it doesn't upset what they believe. And this happens unconsciously. We don't even have to try. And I think that example you're talking about was actually from Michael Talbot's book, where the
Oh, right.
hypnotist he put this guy into a trance,
Yeah.
and he held his daughter with the watch. There was a watch behind her back,
Maybe it's a
and he
watch.
put the
Yeah.
guy into a trance and gave him a suggestion that he would be able to read what was on the watch,
Yeah.
and effectively, without, I don't even think he told him, your daughter's invisible or whatever. He just gave him the suggestion that there would be no barrier to him being able to see what's on the watch. He'll be able to tell the time. But the watch, for everybody else, the watch was hidden behind his daughter's back, and yet somehow he was able to see exactly what the time was on it. So there you go, overlapping reality tunnels.
Yeah. 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 And I think like you say, we kind of do that anyway. If you look at the last 3 to 4 years, you must have had this experience where you're walking with your friends and your family, but you're perceiving the reality in a completely different way. So for instance, they're like totally believing in the narrative of like, you need to have the jab, there's this deadly virus going along. And then there's the other people that are like, that's not my timeline. I don't see it like that. There is no virus, there is no pandemic. We don't need to wear a mask. Like the real problem is like the vaccine. I'm going to have to edit that over YouTube, but and it's like that's the real issue, and like that's the real problem. That's what we need to. And they're like, you crazy conspiracy theorists. And I'm like, you crazy normie. Like, how can you not see it? But we're stood in exactly the same physical space, but our realities are completely overlaid. Like there's my reality and there's yours, and we're like in this kind of dual reality right now. Have you had that experience like with your friends and family in the last 3-4 years?
Oh, dude, try 20 years. You should have seen some of the dinner table conversations we used to have.
Really?
Yeah, I mean it is because I'd be the only one. When I woke up, I was 20, and I started with the metaphysical side of it before I went into the geopolitical conspiracy stuff. So,
Right.
For me, everybody was in this kind of weird, like hypnotic trance, unconsciousness. And if they can't process information that doesn't fit into the belief structure, and when you're operating like that, it's essentially the same as being hypnotized. It's like someone on stage who's been hypnotized to think that they're a chicken. It's no different. It becomes a belief system, and the focus of this person or these people is so utterly narrowed that their focus is, it's like, just look at the swinging,
Yeah.
the pendulum kind of thing, and
Yeah.
that's all they see. And so you can entrain, you can program them to just see that, and everything outside of that just does not exist.
Oh man, we totally saw that, and especially the hypnosis. I've done a couple of episodes on that about, the fractionation techniques they use by putting you in lockdown, taking you out for like a few weeks, and then putting you back in, and then back in again, back out again. Like that's like the fractionation technique of hypnosis. And then they had the double binds. So like like up down, you can't be up and down at the same time. So the new
Mhm.
normal, you can't be new and normal at the same time. And then they had alone
Okay.
together. Alone together is another
Yeah.
one. And then
Yeah.
what was the big one? Oh yeah, social distancing. You can't be social and distance at the same time because social is about
Mm.
togetherness and closeness, and like distance is the
Yeah.
opposite of that. So these are all double binds. So there's loads of hypnosis, the fear, the confusion aspect of it, where they would like be throwing us like different messages every day. Like Fauci would say, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, wear a, like there was a lot of that going on at that level, like the
Yeah.
confusion
Yeah.
element. So there's definitely a lot of hypnosis going on. But yeah, you're right that people had that fixed myopic view of what the narrative was, and they were rejecting anything that didn't fit in alignment with that narrative. And it was quite frightening. Like you said, like the chicken, it's just the chicken only. Like even though there's other stuff going on, it's just like only the
Yeah.
information that reinforces that that's a chicken in front of me, that kind of thing, isn't it?
Totally.
Mm,
That's exactly what happened. They know how to do this. Like
yeah.
they've invested hundreds of
Oh
millions
yeah.
of dollars into mind control, mass mind control. I mean, you know this. So they've
Yeah.
got it perfected. They understand how easy and it is to control the masses. They understand mass psychology to a T and how stupid the masses are. And it's
Yeah.
only when you function as an individual who's in charge of yourself that you stop being so subject to that. But they've got it figured out. Like they've got layers of the onion of control. Like, first it's like, oh, Cooties 19. I like to call it Clownvid 19, right? This is real and we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And then you have another level of, well, no, they lied about a bunch of stuff and it was actually released from a bio lab somewhere. And
Yeah.
and all these layers of keeping people inside the narrative
Yeah.
and keeping them fixated on this very blinkered portion of reality, which is just the narrative, so that they don't see anything else. And it is you just see what you focus on. Remember that there was something that circulated not long ago, a few years back. It was going around. There was a video.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
A guy in a monkey, a gorilla suit, running in between a bunch of people who are throwing
Yeah. Yeah.
basketball
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
And they're like, how many times, did the, count the number of times they passed the ball kind of thing. And
Yeah,
so
you
you're
don't
sitting there
see it.
focusing on the basketball.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you get to the end and you're like, oh yeah, I think they passed it like 23 times or something. And then they go, oh, what about the guy in the gorilla suit? And you're like, fucking guy in a gorilla suit? What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
he was right there on the screen. You go back and look at it. He's there the whole friggin' time. And you
It's
didn't see it
exactly
because
like
you were
that.
given the suggestion.
Yes.
You were given the suggestion to focus on hyper focus on
Yes.
only the basketball. So the rest of the reality and any anomalies would not be seen. They'd go unnoticed.
It's exactly that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick that in before you explain it. So I'm going to actually get the audience to do that first, and then because I think that'd be good for everyone. But the thing is that once you've then seen that gorilla, you can't be fooled again, though, right? They have those kind of
Maybe not by the same gorilla.
Sorry.
I said maybe not by the same gorilla.
Maybe not by the same gorilla, yeah. But you'd sort of hope that they would see it eventually, and then it would kind of break the spell a little bit, and then they'd be able to see it. But unfortunately, they aren't able to see. Yeah, they aren't able
go
to.
ahead.
Like,
Sorry.
the way that
Go
I
ahead.
see it is that we can see problem, reaction, solution. We can see where they want to move it to, and then we can see the steps that they take to reach that point, right? So I always give predictions, and I always say that once you know the destination, you can see the journey. So I say to people, this is what's going to happen, that they're going to create a central digital currency. They're going to try and move us into one world army. They're going to you know, they're going to try and lock us down. They're going to try and ban traveling. They're going to try and monopolize the food source, because I know that's where it's heading, right? It's not that I'm prophetic. It's just that I know that's the end point and I can work backwards. But it seems to me that these people, my friends and family, they can't see things backwards. They can't do a Columbo, you know, they cannot see the potential end goal and then go, okay, let's see what that would look like working up to that. You know, it's just, I don't know, just a different way of, you know, perceiving things. But yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. Like, once you get, and they understand the power of belief systems. And once you get somebody into a belief system, like someone's worldview, like you're talking about somebody's worldview. So, you know, your mum and dad, and most of our parents and grandparents or whatever, have an established worldview that says X, Y, Z happens and ABC does not happen. This wouldn't happen. You know, the government wouldn't do that to us. This is not possible. You know, viruses are real, blah, 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 all this stuff. This is their worldview. And then in that information grid, the only information, the only data that can get filtered through that is data that supports it. And so when we've already had 200 years of, for example, germ theory programming, brainwashing, complete propaganda and fraud, just scientific garbage, 200 years, there is nobody alive on the planet right now that was not born into that matrix of deception and manipulation. And it's very hard to get people to see water that they've been swimming in from the moment they were born, because it's invisible. It's just the way the world is. This is a core belief. When you hear people go, oh, it's just how things are, that's a core belief. And that's a hypnosis. That's a self-hypnosis that they cannot break out of until they allow themselves the opportunity to do that. But you've got all this psychological armoring, emotional armoring that holds the worldview in place. And you know, people get triggered. They get irate if you try to show them something like, here's somebody who was vaccine injured. Oh my God. Like, that doesn't happen. Vaccines are the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, I'm going to have to edit that out. Sorry, brother. But
so
this is how it works. Like,
why do they get so angry though? Like, is it because for them to realize that that is wrong within their belief system, it might be like a domino effect where it might knock the next domino and next domino, and they're kind of frightened of letting that first domino fall to kind of collapse their entire worldview, and then they would realize my whole life has been a lie. Do you think that's maybe what's happening there?
That's a huge part of it. And I can tell you, within my own family, a conversation we had with my dad in the last maybe 2 years ago before we left Australia, he said exactly that. What you just described is because the resistance is partly because he realizes on some level that if he acknowledges what I'm saying, what I've been saying for 20 years, then, like you just said, his whole life has been a lie. At least on some level, it's been a lie, like an illusion. These so many illusions piled on top of each other. And the problem that people have is we come into this world, this virtual reality game, we forget, we don't have the memory of who and what we really are. So we build an identity that then becomes tied into this worldview that we're talking about. So if somebody threatens the worldview with a piece of data that doesn't fit, it also threatens the ego structure that is enmeshed in the worldview. And that's very threatening. We don't like that. It makes us very uncomfortable. It makes us angry, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we see this all the time with people getting triggered by data that doesn't fit their programming. You know, the hostility towards the purebloods over the last 3 years has been off the charts, because people don't want to have to face the possibility that their worldview is bullshit and that they've been misled intentionally and scammed and lied to.
And that the fact that there's actually a global genocide going on, you know.
I mean, it's horrible. Like, it's horrible. For somebody to have to face that in the last 3 years, like to come to that realization. I think back to when I first hit the David Icke stuff, right? Early on in my journey, I had the metaphysical awakening. Then the next stage was the David Icke geopolitical control system. And that hit me so hard in the guts, even though I already had a spiritual foundation, that I put that book down for a month before I came back to it. I've got 99 pages in. I still remember 99 pages in, and I left it for a month and came back to it because I needed a little bit of integration time to let that start sinking in. And then, you know, like we get the agenda, the big picture and where it's all going. But for somebody to have to face this is a genocide, and what they're calling medicine is actually a weapon designed to kill you and millions of you,
Yeah.
to cull the herd, to control. I mean, that's a horrible thing that does not fit into
Yeah.
99% of people's worldviews at all. So there's massive levels of resistance, and no one wants to believe that. Like, I totally understand. No one would want to have to believe that. Just like it was made me sick to my stomach when I first started to get the picture, years ago.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of blissful ignorance, isn't it, that they want? Just keep things happy.
Yeah, like take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Yeah, blue pill. Yeah, take the blue pill. Just be happy. Don't
Sorry,
worry.
yeah, blue pill. Go back, eat your steak and be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why he went back to the blue pill. Yeah. By the way, thank you so much for coming on. That was great, man. Like, yeah, I feel like we could chat about loads of things there. Straight into the
Pleasure.
high dimensionality and everything else. But yeah, no, I really like your channel and what you're doing and the guests you're bringing on. There seems to be like a shared sort of curiosity to the world and consciousness and everything else. And I know you mentioned your book there. Do you want to this is your second book. Do you want to mention your first book as well? And also this new one you're writing?
Yeah, cool. Well, people can find the first one at brendandmurphy.com/TGI. It's called The Grand Illusion. And if they want to check out reviews or just buy a copy, the lowest prices do happen to be on my website, not on Amazon or whatever. Yeah, so it's all about the deep dive into the nature of reality, consciousness. Very broad, but also deep, like tying things together and connecting dots that are not normally, connected, so that we can build a perspective view of things, like I like to say, so it's not just about one little thing. The thread is consciousness and, infinite consciousness, and this is what we are. And then it's kind of like, well, what else happens within that container, and what is the nature of reality? What is the nature of consciousness? And it ends up being the same question, the same answer. But it's a very interesting exploration to spend, 10,000 hours or more, studying it from a lot of different angles. And so the second book moves from where the first one ends, the second one picks up and goes more into, the so-called quantum side of things. So we kind of like more into the out-of-body, non-physical realms. And it's I dare say, a very unique exploration of non-physical existence, which has not been done before.
Yeah, fantastic. But yeah, Brendan, nice one, mate. I feel like we kind of we went straight in with no messing around there, straight into the deep end, didn't we? Yeah, great to have you on, buddy.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's been fun. And yeah, I like to get straight into it. Let's not mess around.
No foreplay, straight in. All right, buddy.
All right, man. Thanks for that. It's been good.